mighty. In just 50 years, 8 of the most powerful civilizations on Earth collapsed, almost simultaneously. Cities that had stood for centuries were burned to the ground. Trade networks that connected 3 continents vanished overnight. And to this day, historians still argue about exactly why. This is the story of the Late Bronze Age collapse, one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Peak of the Bronze Age world. Around 1200 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean was home to the most advanced network of civilizations the ancient world had ever seen. The Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, New Kingdom Egypt, the wealthy trading city of Ugarit, Cyprus, Assyria. Kingdoms that rarely agreed on anything but depended on each other completely. Bronze workshop, because at the center of this world was one metal, bronze. It was the foundation of every weapon, every tool, every army. And bronze required 2 ingredients that almost never existed in the same place: copper and tin. Copper was easy to find. Cyprus alone could supply most of the region. But tin was rare. Some of it may have traveled from as far away as Afghanistan or even Britain, carried across deserts, mountains, and open sea by merchants who had no idea their cargo was holding an entire civilization together. Hittite capital gates. This was, in many ways, the world's first global economy. The Hittite Empire alone controlled vast territory across Anatolia, and like every kingdom in this network, its survival depended on trade routes it did not fully control. Warships approaching burning coast. Egyptian temple inscriptions describe waves of mysterious raiders arriving by sea. Warriors the Egyptians called the Sea Peoples. Fleets of ships appeared on the horizon, and one by one, coastal cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to ash. Inhabitants fleeing besieged city, no one fully knows who the Sea Peoples were or where they came from. Some historians believe they were organized invaders. Others believe they were refugees, fleeing a catastrophe that had already begun somewhere else, sweeping up entire populations as they moved. Ruins of Ugarit burning. The wealthy trading city of Ugarit tells us the most chilling story. A clay tablet found in its ruins, never even fired in a kiln because the city fell before it could be, records the king's final words. Enemy ships had been sighted, and he was begging for help that never arrived. Letters like this one survived by accident, baked hard in the very fires that destroyed the cities that wrote them. Kings pleading with allies for grain, for soldiers, for ships. Messages that, in most cases, arrived too late or never arrived at all. Cyprus copper mining town in ruins. Cyprus, the heart of the region's copper supply, did not escape either. Its mining towns were destroyed, its furnaces went cold, and the metal that had powered an entire age of civilization stopped moving through the network that depended on it. Cracked farmland. But invasion may not have been the only force at work. Deep beneath the Mediterranean seafloor, scientists have found something else, evidence of a drought. A long, brutal drought, possibly lasting over a century, that would have crippled harvests across the entire region at the exact moment these kingdoms needed food the most. Once thriving port now decaying. Royal letters from this period explicitly begged neighboring kingdoms for emergency grain shipments. Some historians believe famine didn't just weaken these civilizations, it may have triggered the very invasions and uprisings that followed, as desperate populations were pushed to the breaking point. Buildings collapsing in earthquake. And there is a third possibility, one written directly into the rubble. The Eastern Mediterranean sits on some of the most active fault lines on Earth. Some archaeologists believe a cluster of powerful earthquakes, an earthquake storm, struck the region repeatedly over several decades, toppling walls and palaces that fire alone could never explain. Mycenaean palace abandoned. In Greece, the great palace centers of Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns were destroyed and never rebuilt at the same scale again. Writing itself disappeared. Greece would enter what historians call a dark age, centuries without large cities, without written records, without the grandeur it had known. Map table with broken trade routes. So which theory is correct? Invasion, drought, earthquakes? The uncomfortable answer most modern historians have arrived at is possibly all of them at once. This is called a systems collapse, when a network of civilizations becomes so interdependent that the crisis in one place doesn't stay in one place. It cascades, it spreads, and it can bring down everything connected to it. Cluster of buildings collapsing across hillside. A drought weakens a harvest. Weakened kingdoms cannot pay or feed their armies. Trade routes break down under the strain. Desperate populations move and sometimes raid in search of survival. And every kingdom that depended on that broken network suffers in turn. A chain reaction with no single cause and no single villain. Refugees walking through ash-covered landscape. Everywhere else, the collapse was final. Population scattered. Survivors fled inland or rebuilt in smaller, poorer settlements far from the coast that had once made them wealthy and vulnerable. Small isolated village in ruins. For the next 300 to 400 years, much of the eastern Mediterranean lived through what historians simply call the Dark Age. Long-distance trade nearly disappeared. Some regions lost writing entirely. And slowly, a new metal, iron, made from ore that didn't require risky trade across 3 continents, began to replace bronze as the material of power. Archaeologists hand brushing artifacts. Today, archaeologists are still piecing together what happened. One broken tablet, one burned layer of soil, one collapsed wall at a time. No single piece of evidence proves one cause beyond all doubt. And perhaps that is the most unsettling lesson of all. That even the most advanced, most interconnected civilization the ancient world had ever built could still be brought to its knees by a combination of forces no one saw coming, all at once. If a network of empires that had lasted for centuries could collapse within a single lifetime, it raises an uncomfortable question about how fragile even the most powerful systems really are. If you want to keep uncovering the stories history tried to bury, subscribe to Vaultline History. New documentaries every week. KT